Welcome back to Are We Fucked, the podcast that asks the big, terrifying questions so you don't have to. I'm Lisa Camillo, anthropologist, filmmaker, and your slightly panicked but still stylish tour guide through the apocalypse. Today, we are diving into the world of prepping with Derrick James, the guy who basically invented prepping before it was cool, or even called prepping. Back in 2007, he started one of the first prepper blogs, and since 2011, he's been cranking out books and content that make surviving the end of the world sound almost doable. Derrick grew up when survivalism was still fringe. Think nuclear warfares. Lots of time in the woods building shelters, hunting with dad, and mastering the art of cooking over fire without setting everything on blaze. He's not just a prepper, he's a wilderness ninja with a backpack full of ammo and a plan. In this episode, we are prepping together for the apocalypse, or, if you prefer, the very real possibility of civil unrest hitting home. And let's be honest, with everything going on, the US is closer than ever to needing a bag-out plan. But this isn't just American prepper talk. It's for everyone who wants to avoid turning into a zombie or a lone wolf howling at the end of civilization. We'll cover food prepping, backpacking, ammo essentials, and why sticking with a community beats doing it alone when shit hits the fan. So buckle up, it's about to get practical, gritty, and maybe just a little bit terrifying.
Hello, how are you?
Well, thank you. It's so great to have you on the show, all the way from Maine, right?
Yes, all the way from Maine, across the big pond. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. So, what is the vibe in the US right now? Are you preparing for something over there? Can you feel something is happening? What are you preparing for?
Well, if you're asking me personally, I mean, I've been prepping for decades now. People have been perceiving that things are heading down a bad direction for a while. And it seems like every turn of the events, something new in the news, some new big political or social change just underscores that sort of growing unease that's already existing, and it just seems to be spreading. I mean, that's sort of my take, and I think it's the take of many other people.
Look, from Europe, for example, I think we can feel it, and we are worried about you guys and what's happening. And there is something going on, not just the US, unfortunately. It's a bit everywhere. I think there is something in the air. But personally, why you've been prepping for 10 years? Like for what? What do you feel it's coming up?
I mean, for me, it's kind of just been a lifestyle thing. Like, there are a lot of reasons. First and foremost, I think, is just an awareness of sort of the fragility of modern society. You know, if anybody that looks at history and sort of thinks strategically about society and technology and our modern conveniences, it doesn't take much to look back a couple of generations and think about life then. And if you wanted food, then you went down to the local butcher, or you knew the farmer or the farmers that were down the street. And, you know, in today's society, we don't have any of that. Our food comes from Mexico or South America, in addition to massive, gigantic farms in the Midwest that are, you know, using annual crops and pesticides and genetically modified corn. And we're very disconnected. We have just-in-time delivery systems where food comes into the grocery stores just in time for it to be purchased. For me, it doesn't take much to imagine a hiccup in that system, the downstream effect of what that would be. So that recognition, plus I have interests in outdoor activities, hunting, fishing, camping. I'm from Maine. I'm from New England. We have sort of a Yankee sort of independent streak amongst us, self-reliance, independence, self-responsibility, all of those things. And then combined with the fact that sort of recognition of the fragility of society really struck home from a prepper perspective once I started having kids. And you realize, well, you know, I could prepare for myself. But then when you have to provide food for children and imagine a collapse and people relying on you, then it becomes a bit more serious.
It's so worrying having kids. That's why we decided not to have kids, because we're already freaking out and we are barely looking after ourselves. So imagine like thinking, oh my God, in an apocalyptic scenario, you know, we also have to think about keeping these creatures alive and calling them him and her, because we don't get food.
I mean, I don't know what the next generations of kids are going to be facing. You know, I call them, if somebody has a baby now, I call them a little carbon bomb. I mean, it's just there's just so many people walking across the planet now. it's hard to fathom.
Absolutely. When COVID hit for me as well, because I realized how fragile the whole economical system is, the food system. As you said, we cannot rely on hunting anymore, or we forgot how to hunt, or there is not much food to hunt anymore. I live in Sardinia, so we have wild boar. So we eat wild boar. It's full of hunters here, friends of ours. So we're constantly getting free food, which is fantastic. And that's why also was our reason to move here, because you have a community that we can sort of help each other if push need to shove need
Push comes to shove.
if push come to shove. So I'm really fascinated with the whole thing. So what have you been prepping about? Like, what are the fundamental prepping tips?
One of the things, how I started sort of my online presence with prepping was starting blogging a long time ago when blogging was still new. I was one of like 3 or 4 or 5 prepper survival blogs, and it was still pretty fringe then. So that's how I got started with posting
You give
information.
workshops, and you travel around as well to teach people how to prep?
I travel to some prepper type events. I don't hold workshops. Most of my stuff I just do online, social media channels and writing, and then I've published other preppers' books as a publisher.
What are the basics? Where can we start if we are super new on it? Should we move somewhere where it's easier to survive in the wild, or stay in the city?
Yeah, for most people, it's not going to be practical to just uproot themselves for prepping purposes. Some might be able to do that. For most people, they're going to prep for where they are in their life situation. So if I was advising a new prepper, I would advise sort of a threat assessment first and foremost. Where is it? What's your socioeconomic status? Where do you live? What are the most likely threats that face you in your situation? And oftentimes they're the sort of things that people don't want to sort of dive into prepping with. The zombie apocalypse, the electromagnetic pulse that hits and just wipes out the grid, and now it's just everyone for themselves. The more likely scenario that people are going to face really are things like job loss, natural disasters, winter storms, short-term power outages, those sorts of things. I always advise starting with those because, well, one, they're the most realistic. That's most probable that's going to happen. And 2, it's easier to tackle something like that than an end of the world scenario. And 3, if you secure the preps needed to handle those types of situations, then that forms a base level of emergency preparedness that you can then build on to prepare for drastic scenarios. So food, water, security, communications, health.
Okay, let's look into all of them since we're here. So the first thing that you need to do, how can you prepare with food? Like store things?
I would move up from, like, depending on where somebody's at, the first thing for many people, honestly, could just be having a week's worth of food in their home. Many people don't even have that. And then moving to a month, and then moving to 3 months. And then if you want to a year.
Wow.
What I would advise people is to start with the foods that you already eat, build a pantry, and cycle through those foods. Shop at the grocery store for your pantry. Shop for dinner from your pantry. As long as you're not stocking so many foods that they go bad, you just rotate that stock. And those are foods that you already have, and that's going to last you a month to 3 months. And then if you want to move into more serious food prep storage and preparation, then you can get into Mylar bags and oxygen absorbers, freeze-dried foods, dehydrators, or producing your own food if that's plausible. Foraging, you can learn foraging. You can use hunting. Again, it all depends on somebody's situation. What might work for somebody living in downtown Chicago or Paris is going to be very different than somebody living in the rural countryside.
Yeah, I don't see really French people in Paris hunting pigeons.
No. You know what's been
Not as
interesting?
young.
What I found interesting is I'm getting more followers and more comments from people in Europe than I ever have.
Interesting. Well, I guess the president of Europe, the chancellor, I don't know what's her name, the title. She was talking about recently how to prepare for, I think, an electric grid outage. And so she was like, have these essential things. And apparently, I don't know, did you hear about that? Was she right about things, or she was a bit wrong, or she was a bit not?
I don't know if, I don't recall that specific piece of news, but I mean, I've seen Finland, I think, or is it Sweden or Switzerland issuing their emergency preparedness booklets, which I would think that they've been doing for a long period of time, but it's becoming more important now, I suspect, and why more people are paying attention to it now is because of the war in Ukraine.
Absolutely. And also recently there was that power outage in Spain. And everybody went out and it was so nice. And I felt like, okay, one more day and you guys would have probably started eating each other and shooting at each other. That's what scares me the most. What scares me is not even food shortage, but it's actually people killing
Yeah.
each other. Would you have guns? Because I'm now thinking about it after watching too many apocalyptic movies.
Would I have guns? Yeah, I have guns. I'm looking at guns. But I know for people in Europe, that's not quite as easy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's trickier. But we're thinking about it more and more. That
Sure.
At least we should being able to access. And I guess there's a lot of hunters here, so it's always a bit easier. You just say, you need a license to hunt, and I guess you can get like a rifle and yeah.
Yeah, I don't know of all of the European laws, but my understanding is you need to be hunting, you need to register the firearm. I think you probably, in some countries, might even require, tracking the ammunition or only allowing you to shoot at shooting ranges. I don't know of all the laws, and it may vary by country,
Yeah.
but it sounds relatively strict compared to,
Yeah.
what we have here in the US.
Absolutely. And you guys have the law as well, the right to self-defense. We
Yes.
don't, because if we shoot somebody, even in our house, we go to jail, which is
That's very bizarre.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Okay, so food. How can you not get rodents in the food or keep them the longest? Some tips you can give us? What do you use generally? Traps?
I mean, you can use traps. If you've got your pantry, then jars, plastic containers. For long-term food storage, we use food-grade buckets. So just plastic buckets and with sealed up tight, and those are rodent-proof.
Okay. Do you have a bunker?
No, I wish. This is the closest thing I've got to a bunker, a room in my basement.
Looks like a bunker, so
It kind of does. Yeah. It's close. I mean, it's in the basement. I'm underground.
Is there a way that you can shut yourself in with your family if something happens? What is the emergency plan? Like somebody attacks, aliens, whatever, war, civil war. Is there a place where you can say, okay, there we'll go?
Well, I'm in a unique situation because of my online personality. Even people that don't know me or where I live, my friends all know that I'm a prepper. They know I have social media channels. I know when
Holy
shit hits
shit.
the fan, I'll come to your house. So what I need to grab all my supplies and go somewhere else.
Wow. Okay. So you have a plan. Can you tell us the plan, or is it a secret plan so people don't follow you?
Well, I mean, I would grab, again, it depends on, we're talking a lot in hypotheticals. The conversation with preppers is usually on the assumption of shit hits the fan overnight and it's virtually apocalyptic, end of the world stuff. What are you going to do? So if we're operating in that kind of conversation, then I'll grab all of my shit and I'll go probably to a family member's house first and then reassess. That would be my plan, just because I know that people know I'm a prepper. And it's too late. The cat's out of the bag on that. However,
Damn it.
that said, if I can accommodate some people, then there's strength in numbers.
Yeah. And if you get really hungry, you can eat John or
Long
Peter
pork.
or get them a bit fatter before. So telecommunication, if everything is down, do you have a radio and do you have a family plan where you know how to talk to each other, or you have
Yeah.
a meeting spot?
Well, home would be the meeting spot. We've got kids, adult kids now that are in different locations, but they don't have the home of their own. So I'd assume that they would come home. I've got all kinds of radios, handheld ham radios. Not everyone in the family knows how to use a ham radio. It would be nice if they did. But again, even with a lot of communications where preppers tend to talk about where they gravitate toward with this shit hits the fan, it's this end of the world overnight apocalyptic situation. And in comments online, if I'm ever mentioning anything electronics, ham radios, handheld GPS, cell phones are an amazing tool, right? I mean, it's like survival tool number one. But people will blast you for even thinking that you can use electronics after a collapse, because they're assuming that everything just goes down. There's countless scenarios where shit could hit the fan and telecommunications don't go down. And then you're going to want your phone. You're going to want the means to be able to charge your electronic devices. That said, if there is an electromagnetic pulse that were to occur, then you want to have some electronics stored in a Faraday bag or a Faraday cage so that, after the dust settles, so to speak, then you can pull that out and you can hook up a ham radio and talk to somebody.
So you mentioned your kids are a bit grown up now. What do they think of the whole thing? Do they take you seriously, or they think like, no, yeah, it's that thing, or they are kind of prepared for it too and learns from you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think this is part side hustle for me. So it's not only a hobby, but it's a revenue source for me. It's not my primary revenue source, but personal preparedness and all social media and stuff, I make money off it. So they see it as part business, but they're also smart kids and they pay attention to current events. So they understand that they're kind of fucked. So I think that they're not preppers per se, but they appreciate the fact that I'm a prepper just in case.
Just in case.
Dad's not going to kick us out. If shit goes down, we know we can go there.
That's good. Very lucky. Okay, awesome. So, what about this whole AI thing? Because I'm just hearing a lot of bit worrying things about the fact that it's self-replicating, it's hiding its code to future versions, it's just trying to go rogue. Do you have a scenario where that happens and you're kind of ready?
I'm less worried about AI than I think a lot of people are. My biggest fear for AI is that it confuses the masses, that people already struggle with what's real now, accusations of fake news, fake media,
Yeah.
and really, honestly, lousy journalism. So people struggle with what the facts are today, and that has serious implications for all of us. I mean, if we can't agree on the facts, then where are we at? It's chaos. It leads to political divisions, which I think can lead to chaos. My biggest fear with AI is that that's going to compound that we're going to have these deep fakes, fake news, and then it's just going to sow a division that already exists and make that chasm even deeper. I worry less about some sort of a Terminator type scenario where AI awakens and starts blasting us all.
Yeah, for sure. You're like, bitch, I'm in the US. Come on. This is the last thing we have to worry about.
But who
Okay.
knows? I'm not in the industry, and maybe there's legit fears that these AI, like drones and robots on the battlefield, are going to, something's going to go haywire and a nuke's going to launch and nobody meant to send it. Who knows? I have no idea. I think that's the thing. We don't know.
Yeah. No, we don't. Yeah, exactly. Actually, you mentioned drones because there've been a lot of sightings in the US of these drones.
Yeah,
that
New
we
England.
don't
My
know
wife
about
and I went out looking at some.
Did you see them?
Yeah. We took video with our phone. It didn't come out that great on our phone, but it was they were very bizarre. It was happening from like Maine, a lot around New Jersey. And Biden was basically ignoring it. And Trump was saying, we need to know what the hell it is. Then Trump
Yeah.
takes office and says, don't worry about it. So,
It's
what it
something, come
was,
on.
but we don't need to worry about it. It was something that was, wasn't an enemy of the state, I guess. But we don't know what it is, at least, average everyday people. But it was pretty bizarre. They were operating in very strange ways. It was obviously very much not a plane going across the sky because they were the ones that we saw would go up, hang around, and then move down, and just is bizarre behavior.
Do you think we're aliens or
I think
foreign intelligence?
no. If I had to guess, I think it was probably sort of some U.S. like secret military type
technology.
drone type testing type thing.
My God, that's so weird. That's really
Very
weird.
weird.
Okay.
When the U.S. took out Osama bin Laden, they used these silent helicopters that nobody even knew about until it was exposed.
Right.
I mean, they've got probably all kinds of tech that we don't even know about.
Do you think that's from aliens though? From era 50,
51?
51?
Probably
I
not.
haven't been there. I should remember.
Probably not.
Inside. Like, oh, damn it. I talk about aliens all the time. It's so interesting. But anyway.
Aliens are coming
I
out
think
of the ocean, right?
Yeah, apparently they're
Yeah.
coming out of the ocean. There's a whole thing, and anyway, it's
Yeah.
constantly there's
May.
yeah. Apparently, well, they're not extraterrestrial. Actually, they are living among us or something like that. So, okay, back to more serious stuff and more plausible scenarios. Looking at the U.S. and seeing how things are. If a civil war starts, because you talked about division with AI, fake news, and impersonations, and which I think it's a very smart point to make. Absolutely. That's very possible. So what do you think are the first concerning things we should worry about and how to prepare?
In a civil war scenario,
Yeah.
I think the first threat is going to be the same as it was with COVID, and that's that disruption in the supply chain. Where is your power going to get cut off? Is your food going to come? I mean, it does. Grocery stores here in Maine, if there's a prediction of a snowstorm coming, the grocery store with milk, bread, bottled water, the day before the storm, it's cleared out. If you get some situation where people know that help is not in grocery store, they'll be empty like that. Gas stations will be empty like that. My understanding is this is the case, and I believe it. If everybody went to just top off their cars right now, gas stations would be completely empty. It's all this just-in-time delivery. So I think that would be the first threat. If there's a civil war, the battlefield is one thing. Meanwhile, we still got to eat tonight. What's that going to look like? How's that food going to come in? Because if there's the East Coast versus the West Coast, for example, a lot of the food comes from the Midwest. Where's that food going? And then what would the battlefield look like? I don't know. It would be terrible.
Do you have bars installed in the windows of your house?
No.
You're not worried about that?
I'm not worried about that. I'm not too worried about a civil war either. I like to hope and think that the country is stronger than that. And I mean, in the Civil War, it was like, in many cases, it was like brother fighting brother. And I think that would be even more the case now. Maine is full of people that have retired in Maine and have family abroad, or they come here in the summer. And then I think that's going to be the case for a lot of the US. That you've got people that were born and raised and have multiple generations in Oklahoma, and you've got also people that just moved to Oklahoma, and you're going to fight each other in other states, your families in other states.
Yeah.
Plus the fact that, if we're looking along political lines, it's almost more rural versus urban, because so many urban areas trend blue or liberal, whereas rural areas trend red or conservative. So, you could take Pennsylvania, for example, and rural Pennsylvania might trend red, but once you get around the cities, those trend blue. So, what would civil war look like in those situations? Cities versus the countryside? I don't even know how that would play out. And they both need each other, right? I mean, a lot of the national economy runs on what's happening in urban centers, and rural areas supply food and manufacturing. And I just don't know how that would play out.
Because when you
We-
create so much division in a country, that's a problem. Then people, when shit hit the fan, they're not going to collaborate. They're going to fight each other, which I think it's very scary.
It is very scary. And again, I don't know if it would be state versus state or regions versus region, but you'd have fights within even just communities if it was along political lines, because you'd have neighbors who are blue and neighbors who are red. How does that play out?
And people blaming each other for the situation.
Yeah, there's no clear boundary. So this is our boundary, and we're going to smash head at the battle line. It's a little bit everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. So have you ever thought, in terms of countries, what countries are safer than others? Have you ever thought about moving?
I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. I mean, this is becoming a hot topic, Plan B countries.
Yeah.
So personally, I'm pursuing second citizenship in Germany. So through my mother, she's German. She's an American now, but I was able to submit paperwork for myself and my kids. And that paperwork's been sitting over there for like 2 years now. But a lot of people are pursuing second passports, residency in other countries, just in case, because they're feeling this growing unease. So yeah, I'm not the only one thinking about that. A lot of people are. And you're seeing that play out, right? Spain is starting to crack down on the visas and the golden visas and all these, you're getting that backlash now, because what happens is Americans, in this case, often it's Americans, are coming into countries with either a bunch of retirement money or American dollars, flooding nice rural countryside communities where they're making 2-3 times as much as the local people, and driving up the price of real estate and services and everything, and then pricing the locals out. And obviously that leads to a clash. But yeah.
I just read it as well just 2 days ago that I think Americans are getting all the visas for the UK. Yeah, kind of making the plan.
And Ireland,
right?
Ireland's a big one too, yeah, because they have fairly loose standards for if you have family members who are, don't quote me on this, but I think Ireland or the UK, I think it was Ireland. One of them, if you had great-grandparents who were Irish, then you could claim citizenship, but I think they just struck that.
Interesting. Do you think Europe will be safer? Okay, so in the scenario of America, something happens, but in terms of climate change, where you think geographically it would be safer? Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, I've written articles on this. If speaking specifically to climate change, I think the US and Europe are probably pretty well positioned. Based on what I've read, I think the biggest threat or challenge to countries like the US or countries in Europe are going to be climate refugees, migration, people that are in Central America or Northern Africa who just are now living in inhospitable conditions and absolutely have no choice but to throw what they own on their back and march north or south, as it may be. And what happens then? And also wars over water. I mean, people have been predicting that we will have wars over water sources for a long period of time. And I think that's starting to manifest as well. Who owns the water? How far upstream do you go? I mean, that's a fair question. Who owns the water?
Agreed. It just happened in between India and Pakistan. I think India cut Pakistan's water, the river. So it's happening. It's scary.
Yeah.
I have wars with my neighbor for the water of my well. He's an asshole, so seriously. But we already are. Can you believe it? It's just,
Well, it's happening in the southwest of the United States, too. I mean, it's a dry area of the United States around Las Vegas. And you've got just a couple of rivers flowing into the southwest, and a lot of it gets consumed for agriculture. And they just continue to build in the middle of the desert. How long can you keep doing that? as the planet warms and people just continue to build. Something's got to give.
Absolutely. And what about in terms of elevation? Do you think elevation would help as well? Maine is quite low, right?
It depends. I mean, we have a long coast, so there's parts of Maine that's at sea level, but you go inland and it gets higher
Which are you? Are you higher or coastal?
toward the more like rural middle area of the state. So, I mean, where I'm positioned, I'm sorry?
Would a tsunami hit you?
No. I think where we live, Maine is well positioned to weather climate change. We've got a lot of natural water sources, and we're north. When I've analyzed the best parts of the United States, Maine, I think, does fairly well.
Did you move there for a reason, or was just a coincidence?
No, I was born and raised here.
Okay, so cha-ching, you're just like, good.
Go lucky.
The right place.
Right.
What do you hunt around there when you go hunting?
You can hunt moose, deer, bird, geese, bear. Me personally,
You
I
hunt bear?
You can hunt bear, yeah. I don't.
You eat them? To eat them,
yeah.
or just for fun?
To eat them.
Jesus.
I hunt deer.
Bear meat. Ooh.
It's actually pretty good. Bear's pretty good.
Yeah.
Bear's actually pretty good.
I tried once a deer prosciutto. Can you believe it, in Sydney?
No, I've never had that.
Quite nice.
Was it wild deer?
Yeah, wild. Yeah, it was hunted. See.
Yeah, it must have been pretty lean though. Prosciutto's got a fair amount of fat on it, right?
I think it had a nice little fat on top, and so when you cut it, it was nice.
Yeah, that's the challenge with the wild deer here is that there's just not much fat on them. So usually if I got a deer last year and I took it to a local butcher rather than do it myself. And for the burger, I had him add actually some beef fat to it just to fatten it up a little bit. But yeah, I hunt deer and bird. But a lot of people will hunt moose and bear, and you can go all in if you really want. Coyotes.
Cats, dogs, whatever.
Some cats I'd like to hunt, yes.
We're cat lovers. Well, what about birds? Do you have lots of nice birds there, or the population is declining?
Well, that's another whole topic, right? The decline of the animal kingdom. I would not want to have to rely on bird hunting in order to feed myself. That would be pretty lean eating. For me, it's an excuse to get out into the woods and go exploring and just be out in the natural environment. So, that's what bird hunting is to me. Deer is the same thing, but you're going to get a lot more meat if you get a deer.
Okay. So what's the number one thing everybody should know about surviving some extreme events? What would be the first thing you'd be like, okay, everybody should know this?
I would say probably the most important thing that everyone should know is how to find and purify water.
Yeah, right.
And that could mean, and again, that's going to depend on what your situation is. Again, if you're living in an urban environment, finding water is going to be a bit more of a challenge. You're going to have to be a little more creative. You're going to have to, empty out pipes or toilet tanks or look for cisterns on rooftops or collect rainwater in some fashion. If you live in Maine, it's going to be a lot easier. I often talk about storing rice and beans in some social media videos and stuff, and I always get the comments, what are you going to do about water? And I forget that not everyone has ready access to water. Like I could walk out behind my house and dip my cup in a stream and purify it and drink, but I forget that not everyone has that option. So to me, it seems like, well, I'm just going to go outside and get water. But being able to find water and make it safe to drink is probably the single most important thing that folks would need to know.
Well, how do you make it safe? There are some techniques, I know, like some evaporation, some things like that. Is there also something, a quick fix, something like, like a tube I see with the technology where it filters while you drink it? Or
Yeah, survival straws, those are quite popular among preppers. The easiest time-tested method is to just boil the water at a rolling boil for a minute, and that's going to make it safe to drink. It's not going to remove chemicals, so if there's a chemical spill, it's not going to remove heavy metals, anything like that, but parasites and bacteria, it's going to kill all of that and make it safe to drink. But yes, if you have the equipment, having a filter would be a nice option because then you don't have to find fuel or make a fire to purify the water. You can just process the water through the filter and remove the contaminants.
Interesting. Okay. If we want to tell everyone how to pack a preparedness bag to have it at the back of the closet, what would have in it? Do you have one?
Yeah, you're talking about a bug out bag.
What is it called?
Bug out bag.
Bug out, like run away?
Yes, so bug out bag. Or in some cases, people call them different. Sometimes people will call them a get home bag if they keep in their car. So if shit hit the fan and you're at work and you can't get through traffic because there's a traffic jam, you can open up your trunk and grab your get home bag and it's going to have the supplies that you need in order to get home.
Interesting.
Or 72-hour bag, they're called, because usually if you're building a bug out bag or an emergency bag, you aim for like a 3-day supply of equipment.
What would you have in it?
Water. It comes back to the same basic needs, right?
Yeah.
Shelter, food, security. So again, this depends on your situation, right? A lot of people assume that they're going to build a 3-day bug out bag strapped on their back and go into the woods. That's not really practical for most people. Most people struggle walking down the street, let alone hiking 3 days. But everyone's situation is different. So you need to build the bag that makes sense to you and your situation. If you're living in the city, having a bug out bag probably makes a lot more sense than having a bug out bag for somebody who lives in a rural community. Because if shit hits the fan, where's the person who living in a rural community? Where are they gonna go? If there's a national crisis, they're probably not gonna go anywhere. That would be dangerous. Make more sense to stay right where they are. They might want a bug out bag if there's a natural disaster coming, a tornado is coming, or something suddenly happens. They need to grab their bag and go. Somebody living in downtown Manhattan in New York City, their bug out bag is going to look very different because if there was a cataclysmic type shit fan event, they're not going to be able to take their vehicle and get out of the city. They're probably going to have to go on foot. It could be chaos. They may need more defensive tools in their bag than somebody else might. But it's going to come to those same things. Water, you're not going to be able to carry 3 days worth of water because water is just too heavy. So you're going to carry a little bit of water and have those means to purify water. You're going to have some food that you may want, like we call them meals. I'm looking around me. Meals ready to eat, like a military style meal that's just all packaged and just preserved and ready to go. Or you may want a camping stove to cook some foods, but you're going to have foods in there. You probably will have some type of security. And by security, I mean a handgun or a pepper spray or a stun gun, something like that. Again, depends on your situation. If I had to walk 3 days in the woods as my bug out plan, I would probably leave a handgun at home just because I want speed, and handguns and ammunition's very heavy. And I'm probably not going to see anyone in the woods anyway. And shelter, the right clothes, a way to stay warm, way to stay dry. And in Maine, we've got all 4 seasons. So a winter bug out bag is going to look different than a summer bug out bag.
What about matches? Do you have like those matches that it's one match that do you know the one that I've seen you can get wet or
Yeah, fireproof, stormproof. Some people call it hurricane matches. You can basically light it. In some cases, it'll burn underwater or burn in the wind. I have a pile of those. I have a ferro rod, which is what you strike and you get the sparks to make a fire. Or lighters usually work quite well. They work less well in the middle of the winter. So I'll carry a ferro rod. I'll talk about making fires in natural ways, and people will say, just carry a Bic lighter. I'm like, well, I've been winter hiking before, and the Bic lighter actually does not work.
What is
The Bic lighter? Bic is the brand, a lighter, like a cigarette. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And also maybe one of those emergency blankets, the one that are reflectant.
People carry those. I don't. They're pretty flimsy. For me, that's not like a bug out bag piece of equipment for me personally. If I worked in an ambulance and somebody fell in a freezing lake, then yeah, I'd pull them out and wrap that around them. I see people wearing them after they do triathlons, but something that's going to last much beyond one use.
Yeah, sure. Okay. What else? Is there anything that you think that everyone should know that is super interesting?
I think one of the things that I find at least interesting is the community versus lone wolf type approach to
Good
prepping.
one.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, there's advantages to both, but in a long-term collapse scenario, the community always wins. In America, people tend more towards preparedness in that sort of it's just me versus the world type thing. And I don't know whether that's because it's a country built on self-responsibility and pick yourself up and do it versus other countries where there's more socialist type approach to let's take care of each other.
Yeah, Italy's like that a bit.
Yeah. But in the end, in any type of long-term collapse, the community always wins. The strength in the numbers. You can't do things on your own for very long. In the short term, the lone wolf folks might do okay, but they're going to hit a wall at some point. And that's what I find a lot of people too. There's a thing called werewolf preppers, which kind of ties into this. People, I don't know if they self-identify as werewolf preppers, but it's what they are. Prepping seems overwhelming to them. It seems expensive. It seems just too time consuming. I'm just going to store a bunch of guns and ammo and then just go after the preppers. They're stocking.
God,
Yeah, they're stocking everything that I need. I just need to go for them.
interesting. Wow.
Well, it's a kind of flawed logic because it's like, well, why don't you just take care of it? If you're preparing all these guns and ammo, why don't you just take the rest of the steps to prepare for yourself?
You're so fucking lazy.
That's my thought. Yeah, very, very lazy. The other thing is you folks are preparing to take stuff from the people who are prepared to defend against people like you. You're targeting the wrong group. So you might take the first one or the second one, but your luck's going to run out fast.
It's true. Watch out, guys. No, do not mess with this guy. with the community. Great, Derrick, it's been really fascinating and very, very practical. Love that. I'm going to start having a little bug out bag somewhere. Actually, no, I'm staying here because we're actually in the country and that's the whole
Well, everyone should have a bug out bag. You never know. Prepping is about options, having options.
Yeah, true. And just you forget it in the cupboard anyway. It's just there, at least you have it.
Yeah, I would argue you should use it and adjust it for the seasons. At least know the equipment that's in there and how to use it.
Yeah.
It's a good introduction to prepping anyway, learning some of these skills. And, if you're into any outdoor activities, whether it's hunting or fishing or camping or hiking, a lot of these things are things that you can use.
Yeah, so it's good to learn in advance, like those skills.
I think so. And I think that's another thing that a lot of people don't realize when they get into prepping. They see it as an accumulation of stuff, things I need to buy, things I need to get, not always things I need to learn or things I need to practice or skills I should build.
Yeah, like fixing or electronical
Medical,
system.
yeah, how to stop a bleed, yeah, how to fix something around the house, all those things. How to get through the woods with a GPS and a map and a compass.
Very cool and very scary at the same time. Okay, but it's good to be prepared,
It is.
really.
It is
But
good.
thank you so much. It's been really, really interesting.
Thank-
Yeah. We'll see you out there and form a little community to survive a
Okay.
community, hopefully.
All right.
Take care. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Derrick.
Thank you.
Take care. Ciao.
Bye-bye.
And that's a wrap on this wild ride with Derrick, founder of Prepper Press and probably the most grounded guy you'll ever meet, who owns a bag-out bag, a water filter straw, and enough tactical gear to make the National Guard blush. He's been ready since 2007, and after this chat, you might be too. Or at least know where to stash your canned beans. This podcast series is proudly produced by Against the Tide Films. To dive deeper into our work, visit againstthetidelefilms.com. Don't forget to tune in every 2 weeks for a fresh episode of Are We Fucked? Hit subscribe, leave us a rating, and set yourself a reminder to catch each episode on your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on Instagram at AreWeFucked_the podcast for clips, memes, and updates. If you're feeling generous and want to keep this podcast caffeinated and alive, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/arewefucked_the podcast. Because let's face it, we will need coffee grounds when fighting for our lives deep in the woods. The future might be uncertain, but with a good prepper plan, at least your snacks won't run out. Thank you for tuning in, climate warriors and future preppers. Until next time, stay informed, stay prepared, and maybe stash some peanut butter under your bed. You never know. This is Lisa Camillo signing off. Take care and remember, the future is ours to shape. Just maybe pack a flashlight.